Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and get started if you're okay with that, Irfan. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, welcome everyone to our virtual talk through WKU. I first want to thank everyone for attending, both near and far, and going from an in-person talk to a virtual talk like this, we now have people from all over the world attending today. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for either getting up really early or staying up really late. Oh, I lost my thing. And so we thank you for joining us. And I hope that you find Irfan's talk to be helpful and meaningful, particularly right now. And a quick introduction of Irfan for all of you. First, Dr. Hošić was co-curator of the Bosnian Pavilion for the 55th Venice Biennale with the exhibition titled Garden of Delights, which highlighted the work of artist Mladen Milanović. His research includes modern and contemporary art and design, as well as the role of art and culture as an agent for resistance and for change. He's an art critic, curator, and assistant professor at the University of BiH, with teaching venues that have spanned the University of Michigan, the University of Paderborn in Germany, and in 2019 at the Florida Gulf Coast University. His PhD is from the Department of Art History, Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences at the University of Zagreb, and his primary area of research is the art of Bosnia and Herzegovina in the 20th and 21st century. Irfan's current research project as a Fulbright visiting scholar at the College of Creative Studies in Detroit, titled Sarajevo's Post-Industrial Cultural Landscape, Art in Crisis, focuses on artists exploring issues of post-industrial landscape as a site for significant artistic action and production. It was my fortune to first connect with Irfan in 2017, also remotely via email, while doing research on and in Bosnia and Herzegovina through a Zuhir Sofia Endowed International Faculty Seminar Fellowship known as ZIFES. Irfan was extremely generous and instrumental in leads for my ZIFES research, which informed the 2018 WKU International Year of Bosnia and Herzegovina exhibition titled Proof of Existence, an exhibit of work by contemporary artists of Bosnian and Balkan origin. It was a delight to have the opportunity to meet in person for the first time this past summer during the Kuma International Conference in Bosnia, which I think several people from that Kuma International are actually here today, so welcome, where I had the pleasure of seeing him speak both in Sarajevo and in his home city of BiH. And I'm so pleased that he is now here in our Zoom universe to share his work and scholarship with all of you. This is the third of 3 talks that Irfan has generously given to us. One this afternoon on design in Sarajevo during the siege for our partners at South Central Kentucky Community and Technical College. And on Friday, he gave a talk and discussion about his Fulbright experience and gave advice for those interested in applying for a Fulbright program themselves. So that recording will be available either through me or through the WKU Office of Global Learning and International Affairs for any faculty or students interested in a Fulbright. He gave some excellent advice and shared a lot with us. I'd like to thank those who helped to make these events possible. My partners at WKU in the Department of Art, which includes Christina Arnold, Alicia Freya, and Natalie Tyree, and in the Office of Global Learning and International Affairs, particularly Lauren Reyes, as well as our partners at Sky CTC, including Matt Kirby and Annie Smith, and the Fulbright Outreach Lecturing Fund, which lent support for this. And so finally, a huge thank you to you, Irfan. I have so enjoyed working with you, and we have shared many an email over the last several months, both for the planning of the in-person talks and now in this new version. And I just feel close to you. I share my heart with you, and I thank you for all your generosity and patience in this process, and for sharing with us your beautiful, complex, and inspiring in so many ways Bosnia. So welcome.
Thank you very much, Ron. I'm so happy that all those talks are actually happening, and all that wouldn't be possible without focus of you and your colleagues who really were great support, not only when we tried to organize my in-person coming to Western Kentucky University, but also within now with that crisis that we are all dealing with, not only here in the United States, but in the whole world. I'm very privileged actually to have a possibility to try to give an overview about certain focus, about certain group of artistic focuses by Bosnian artists. I mean, this means a lot for me, and because Bosnia is a small country, it's not even anymore on the map of international whatever news, or it's not so relevant on a daily news, but I still have possibility to have this conversation with all of you. So when I was trying to figure out how we will organize this lecture in a term of which topic we will cover, it was kind of, I mean, it is always hard to extract something certainly, I mean, to put focus on something particularly, because there are always, you know, limitations. There are limitations that another things will be left over or not mentioned. And I'm very aware that just talking about layers of crisis in the art of for Bosnia and Herzegovina, I'm very aware that this could eventually lead to the wrong particular and exclusive conclusions. So I just want to say before I start that there are many other artistic attempts and interests among artists in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which not only deal with the issues of crisis, but me personally, I was always interested in those heavy times and turns and switches that has been going on in my country, and all those turns are very interesting in terms of when you just chronologically follow. We had a half of the century socialism within the former socialist Yugoslavia. Then we had the Yugoslavia fall apart. The new republics within from Yugoslavia emerged: Bosnia, Serbia, Croatia, and others. And during that time, those countries initiated transition from socialism to capitalism and democracy. And some of those republics were more successful, some of them were less successful, some of them had brutal wars and conflicts, some of them not, which is of course very good. And yes, after the war, new society has been established with new kind of agenda, social agenda, cultural agenda, and all those things, those time and political frames that I've just mentioned, they are just playing very important role in nowadays too, because those time frames, they are still very tangible, very alive, and very present in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So today I will try to when I talk about crisis, I will just try to point out those following focuses, like conflict, migration, just to mention post 9/11, post-industrial landscape, and global migrations, which just became a part of reality a few years ago, particularly in the town where I live and where I'm coming from. But maybe it is interesting also to talk a little bit about context and use the artworks of Bosnian artists to try to understand social, political context that I was just briefly mentioning previously. So, as said, Bosnia and Herzegovina, I marked with yellow, was part of socialist Yugoslavia, which is marked with red, and it is in almost in a central or southeastern part of the Europe, neighboring with Italy, Austria, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Albania, and Greece. And you could even think about former Yugoslavia about like as a small Soviet Union. It was a small country, but still for European standards, pretty big country with a lot of different languages, a lot of different, let's say, cultures and religions. Yugoslavia was very multicultural country, multi-religious, having even approximately same number of Serb Orthodox, Croat Catholics, Bosnian or other Muslims, and it was very diverse with a lot of different languages, Serbo-Croatian, Slovenian, Macedonian. So it was kind of a real multicultural country with diversity. But as we see from events in the 90s, it was not well managed. There were certainly a lot of failures in leading and organizing the country, and the rise of nationalism and right-wing politics within democracy led to conflicts and turmoil. When artists, I mean, the issue of border within such a society, all those borders that has been very active and very alive in the late 80s when the politicians start talking about independence of those republics like Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, and others. It was in a daily news, like overwhelming topic that was like it was the citizens were simply mobbed they were under the mobbing with the issues of borders, of limitations. There were even always in like talks about how to draw, how to redesign certain borders, establishing of new states. So it was a kind of context of border madness. And one of the masterpieces related to that issue was produced by Sarajevo-based artist Maja Bajević in 1999, where she organized a long performance in a national gallery of Bosnia and Herzegovina. The performance was actually using the whole set of tailoring practices where she measured her body, she's measuring her body, taking measurements, transforming those measures to the textile, and then she cuts the textile, and at the end she tailors and she sews that that textile into a fashionable item. And at the end, she produced a dress, and she take it on, and she present it as a final product. And this is very successful sublimation of the whole madness that was spanning over the late 80s and beginning early 90s. Not only in Bosnia and Herzegovina particularly, but of course, Bosnia and Herzegovina is heavily hit by the fall of Yugoslavia, and this is very visible in the work of Lana Čmajčanin, another artist. She was using the same approach. She's referencing to the tailoring magazines. I don't know if you are familiar with Burda. Burda is a German like sewing and fashion magazine that is still exists and very popular. And I can remember from my childhood, my aunt and my mother were prescribed to those. They were getting on a monthly those magazines, and they just like they were just hobbies doing at home, small fashion items. And Čmajčanin, an artist, Čmajčanin, she used those templates, cutting templates, and she transforms the issues of Bosnian and Herzegovinian actual borders. And Bosnia and Herzegovina is very complicated country in a term of how it is politically organized throughout different levels of governmental organizations. There is state, there are entities, there is one district also as an entity, separated entity, and even one of the entities has even a cantons, which has been established upon model from Switzerland. And all those things are making the functioning and daily flow of the governmental flows very hard in a country. And this, I would even say that Lana Čmajčanin work is therefore deals with very complex realities that are not only related to war, but very strongly to the post-war realities on many, many different levels. And it is interesting that those techniques of tailoring has been used in a larger scale too. What we see here is the river Neretva in the city of Mostar, which the city of Mostar is having that a great panorama with the old bridge, and this image is just made as a big performance of artist Gorana Anđelić-Galić. She entitled it "Sewing Up," because Mostar shores of Neretva are actually the lines, the borders of division, invisible, let's say natural borders. On the eastern side, this is predominantly Islamic community. In a western side, it's predominantly Croat Catholic community. Something similar like in Northern Ireland, in Belfast, in Londonderry, in those conflict societies that we kind of traditionally know from the news. And that division that is still going on in the city of Mostar, in one of the, maybe the third or the fourth largest city in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the regional capital of Herzegovina, is the issue that is also still nowadays. I mean, when I speak about political flows, it's very actual. It's still going on. It's not something related to the years 20 years ago. It's still very actual. Those artworks are very kind of referent, and they are still bespeaking the very confused and conflicted realities of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And this is also about borders. I'm still on the borders. We just see that there are many artworks who are dealing with borders, because borders are producing a madness in a media, in a public sphere, in all spheres of life. Andrej Jerković, he made a very significant, I mean, this border between those two entities in Bosnia, he drew it simply on the tish tennis, table tennis. I don't know how you say it in English, table tennis probably. And he just used the metaphor of that net of the table tennis to say that although this border is invisible in a daily life in Bosnia and Herzegovina, it makes the game impossible. The game between among, or let's say between those two sides and those two entities is simply not possible. You cannot play that game. The game is not feasible. One of the older works by kind of older generation of artists, Alma Suljević, who is teaching at a fine art academy in Sarajevo, untitled. It's about landmines and about overwhelming presence of landmines and the dangers that the landmines are causing in a daily life. So she was dealing with that project a few years long, even selling the landlines, having performative like purchase options. She sells the maps, and in exchange, she invests that money to the initiatives and projects who are dealing for cleaning the landmines, because we still, after almost 30 years, after the 25 years after the war, there is still a lot of fields who are contagious or affected with the mines. And one of very interesting and personal, very personal works made by Banja Luka-based artist Borjana Mrđa. She also hold on that problem with borders, and her personal scar on her head is actually in the shape of the country's border, in the shape of the Bosnia and Herzegovina. And this is so interesting because she's coming from part of the country which politically initiated separation of one entity, like trying to split apart those from Bosnia. Also, her colleague from the same region entity, Mladen Miljanović, made rope, suicide rope, hanging rope in the shape of the country's border. And this is so interesting to see how many artists responded on the, how to say, issues of belonging to Bosnia as a Bosnians or as a citizens of Bosnians. And when you say a Bosnian, then you can mean a lot. You can mean as a Bosnian Serb, as a Bosnian Croat, as a Bosnian Muslim, and Bosnian Jews, or Bosnian Romani. And there are many. It's very multicultural, very diverse, and very layered society. Getting back to Gordana Anđelić-Galić and her video called Mantra from 2006 is a very interesting piece of art that I hope I have possibility to play for you, at least just a small segment. So I do hope it will work. It perfectly speaks about Bosnian Herzegovinian society. I see there is a problem with flow, but I will try to play it one more time. If it doesn't work, we will just skip it. I don't know why that if why it doesn't work. There is some glitch or error, but I will just briefly explain what's going on. So an artist, Gordana Anđelić-Galić, she's walking in one alley, and one invisible person is dropping to her flags, different flags from different ideologies, states, politics that have been ruling the country throughout the past and current time. And her duty to hold those flags high, to rise them high, is it's becoming very complicated. And in that image that I showed here, you can just see how is she struggling with those tens, dozen of different flags. And I'm sorry, it doesn't work. I will just use an opportunity to try.
So Irfan, I think your mic got a little bit lower. So can you turn up your volume a little bit on your computer?
Oh, it's very high. So you have a problem hearing me?
It's a little bit lower for me.
I don't know what to do.
I can hear you though, so I think we'll just turn up ours. But
yes,
okay.
Please, because my volume is on almost a maximum.
Okay. All right.
So let's try one more time with that video. If it doesn't work, we will just skip. No, it doesn't work. Never mind. Still being at the borders, I was just talking about Trio, and designer collective from Sarajevo in a previous talk, and they produced so they are graphic designers, and their primary medium is graphic design. And talking about borders in Bosnia was not only related to the fall of Yugoslavia and emerging of new states, but even some other social and political realities after the fall of Yugoslavia. So after the war, Bosnia was kind of politically abandoned, and with Bosnian passport, you couldn't easily travel. That was a while after the war. Now that moment is adjusted, and the Bosnian passport is kind of not so bad. You can travel around Europe without visas. But that particular work, Europe 22, so it was made in 2004, about the year that we are in right now, shows manipulation of geography, of the landscape, geographical landscape of the continent. We see a huge channel made to divide Eastern and Western Europe, and this can be also a prism or a view or optics to observe an issue of global migration that I will come later on at the end of that presentation. So conflict was obviously very important issue in Bosnian and Herzegovinian society throughout the war and after the war, and it's still very tangible and very present issue that is observed also by artists, but also from different perspectives. Radenko Milak is one of most prominent and very internationally present artists. He's a painter. He used an image made by American New York-based photographer Ron Haviv, who was in Bosnia at the beginning of the war. And Ron Haviv, as a photo reporter, reported about cruelties which Serbian militia has been doing with citizens of Bosnia just at the beginning of the war. And Radenko Milak was he was using, as we see, the sentence that Ron Haviv was giving in one of his interviews, and what else did you see? And he answered, I couldn't see everything. And this is actually a trigger for Milak. He, as an artist, as a painter, he deals, he uses a medium of painting, and he deals with different perceptions of certain historical events. And he also initiates discussions with his over about limitation of photography and the limitations of art. Maybe just to mention in that moment acclaimed image theoretician W.T. Mitchell. He's, I think, professor at the University of Chicago and one of the most prominent theoreticians about image. He says when talking about a character of photography, that photography upon the beginning of photography, when the photography just was beginning to exist and to occupy public space, and nowadays the character of photography radically changed. Mitchell says at the beginning photography was a bearer of truth, and nowadays it includes manipulation, fake content, and actually false connotations. So this is kind of frame that Radenko Milak is using. He produced a bunch of the same. He produced like dozens of same paintings. When I say same, he used the same photography as a starting point, as a reference, and he made the whole walls, and he occupies the walls of the galleries where he exhibits with those, let's say, single one view. Also, when we talk about conflict in the Bosnian post-war society, Adela Jušić she made that video, The Sniper, in 2007. I would say that video launched her, if I may say, into international artistic flows. She was, with that video, she was kind of, let's say, discovered or better seen by curators and cultural managers. And that video was presented in many shows back in that time. So she was using a very, very intimate and personal memory related to her father, which was, he was a soldier in Bosnian army, and he was a sniper. And she writes in her, the part, I mean, in that work, this is a video work and a written statement, it's very complex work. She speaks that she found his diary, because the snipers, they are very special force, having diaries, being on duty, and how many people they have disabled or, let's say, killed. And she founded that diary, and she was shocked learning about her father this way when she was still in an early teenage. And she produced a very remarkable and very significant piece of art because her father was also shot down by another sniper, and she reconstructs that development. She begins with that red dot, then she plays, I don't have an expert here from that video, and then she plays photography or her father, and then at the end, the red dot is appearing on his eye, where he was shot actually by another sniper. When it comes about, I'm still talking about conflict. Što te nema? It's in translation, why are you not coming? Why you don't appear? It's nomadic monument made by New York-based artist Aida Šehović. She was involving herself in something very emotionally deep. She made that very emotional nomadic monument, which is thematically related to genocide in Srebrenica, one of the worst things happened in Europe after the World War II. And she was, so there has been thousands and thousands of young men, mainly men, so males has been killed, while females has been kept alive. And the situation that is now going on, there is a lot of sisters and mothers still searching for their beloved sons, husbands, and brothers. And those small pots for Bosnian coffee, they are representing the number of dead people in Srebrenica genocide, and she's moving and she's pouring coffee over them. She has produced that performance in different cities worldwide. So I would like to skip to another kind of frame, which is migration. And migration it's still kind of very dynamic issue within Bosnia and Herzegovina society. There are a lot of artists, and there is like Bosnia and Herzegovina has approximately, or let's say had, before the war had a little bit more than 4,000 million citizens, but now nowadays, according to the last census, it has 1 million citizens less. So just to be clear, not all of them died in the war, but like million citizens or approximately are displaced. They have been forced to migrate from one region to another, and many of them just remained in those new lives, in new regions. And I just would like to show some of those works that are showing the issues of migration viewed from the Bosnian Herzegovinian perspective. So this work of art is made by Sheila Kamaric, an artist, also internationally very acclaimed artist, and very good represented in international galleries. She redesigned the signs that you can even see here in American customs and borders, showing the lines, the cues for American citizens and for other citizens. There is already kind of small institutional discrimination present in her. She speaks about European context, and she puts those signs on a pedestrian area in the different cities. That, for example, is made in Ljubljana, which is part of EU. Bosnia is not part of EU, European Community, but both of them were part of Yugoslavia. So the situation is very dynamic. It's dynamic. There is a kind of very dramatic dynamic between, on a political level, between those states, and she puts those signs just on pedestrian area and initiating reminder that certainly this path should be only for you citizens, and another one should be for others. Andy Poskovic is professor at the University of Michigan, here close to where I am right now, Detroit. He's a printmaker, and he made excellent. He's a printmaker. He produced a big scale prints with woodcuts that are made out of a lot of plates, a lot of colors. And he personally, he was at the beginning not a refugee. He was as a senior student, he was awarded with a fellowship to Scandinavian countries just before the war. And when he was there, like me right now here in the United States, he was simply surprised and shocked that in his country war started. Like me right now, being here with the corona issues, I cannot, if I would like to go back to Bosnia, I cannot do that right now. It's very complicated. So I have just to figure out how to remain here and to survive here and to maintain stability. So he was having, of course, much heavier task to find a solution how he can not get back to Bosnia, to war, and he emigrated to United States. And all his experience being of belonging and mobility and moving on is kind of sublime, is sublimated in that image. He makes a house. I recognize a house with that chimney on a wheels, and he makes it kind of as a toy, as a tool for playing with kids, or that someone can pull it around and take it wherever he wants. And he made a whole, I mean, even that inscription, his name is Andy, and he made that inscription, Indiana, referring to something of like state Indiana, like some kind of entity that he was producing in a utopian way. His own utopian country or state, Indiana, is where he belongs, like he doesn't belong nowhere. The country he left was Yugoslavia, but now his country is called Bosnia, but he lives in the United States there. And he moved a lot in the United States, from California to Michigan and many other states. So that piece of art perfectly speaks about the issue of migration. And another also American-based artist living in Florida, he was studying, Amer Kubashka, he was studying an art in one of New York art academies, and he couldn't afford good, I mean, in a material and financial level, he couldn't afford good life. So he was moving to different flats and rooms by different friends and people he knew. And he was depicting those, he was making small size paintings of those studios and flats and rooms that he lived and worked. And with those small size paintings, he kind of gained, I would say, a success because he was later on represented by one of the famous galleries in Chelsea, in Manhattan, and then he transformed those small sized images into the big one. And I was lucky to see several of his exhibitions, and his paintings are strong, monumental, big size, using that very strange perspective as a metaphor of unstable ground, of instability in the life, which was simply part of his life when he was when he was a student. And so there are some of those perspectives that he was, and I mean, established with his optics. Post 9/11 issue within Bosnian art is something that I have personally explored and put on display as an exhibition, and I published, I would say, a comprehensive catalog over, I don't know, 150 pages about, excuse me, about that issue. And it would be the real presentation on its own to talk only about post 9/11 reflection within Bosnian art. But to be brief, so this is the catalog of that. This is the poster of that exhibition. On that poster, it's Harald Seemann, a famous curator and a person, a scholar who turned curatorial practice into something new. And on the left side is artist Alma Suljević. I will use that single example of that relation between Bosnian and art and 9/11. So Harald Seemann was curating a show in Switzerland, and he was not inviting Alma Suljević to participate in his show, and she appeared there fully covered in that, how do you say, niqab clothes, which are weared by Saudi women, fully covered with face, with hair, with everything. But additionally, she had fake bombs on her body. She was kind of acting as a suicide terrorist. And when she appeared, when she popped up at the exhibition, the security, it was a whole mess. It was a whole mess. The whole security procedure was initiated, but Harald Seemann recognized her, and then he hugged her, and her photographer was documenting that moment when they were hugging, kissing each other. And but since Bosnia and Herzegovina and many other Balkan countries are dominantly populated by Muslims, there was a kind of reflection, special reflection to the 9/11 events. And I was simply very thrilled by that fact. And I was, as said, putting that on display. Also issue that triggers me very personally is post-industrial landscape of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I could even extend my talk to my project here in Detroit, which is actually also initiated and sort of inspired by post-industrial flows and situations. So I probably said this, but I will repeat. During the socialism, Yugoslavia was it was developed country with great and sophisticated resources, industry, so everything kind of, I mean, it was very sophisticated country. And within transformation from socialism to capitalism and process of privatization of those capacities, many things were abused, corruption, clientelism, and criminal destroyed industrial capacities, not in the scale of 100%, but in a large scale, in the scale that is concerning, that is very tangible and very visible within the society in Bosnia. So I'm showing here some companies that were closed, just couldn't succeed anymore competing on a national or international with international economies, and also adding to that, also interesting post-industrial and post-socialist related context is work made by Mladen Milanović, an artist that I have opportunity to collaborate several times. First time with Bosnian Pavilion and Biennale in Venice in 2013, and lately last year in BiH, I will have an opportunity to show you that project with few slides. So just briefly, to mention Mladen Miljanović. When he finished his high school, he applied to be trained as a military personnel, as an officer, and so he was a soldier professionally, and he was working as a soldier. He was educated in that particular military barrack in Banja Luka, called Vrbas. And when the war finished and the country had to transform its military capacities within new NATO standards, that military barrack and kasarm was kind of neglected. It was suggested by NATO that it shouldn't be any more military part of the military, and the city, so military allow the university to take over those premises and to move in, which is kind of big campus. And he was left over. He didn't know what to do. The new situation forced him to stop being a soldier, but he continued to study fine arts in that campus. And immediately when so this is kind of his personal transformation from being a soldier to being an artist. And for me, this is so interesting, and it reminds me a lot to the life of Joseph Beuys. I don't know how familiar are you with his life of Joseph Beuys. He was a Luftwaffe soldier in the Second World War, and then he was hit by Soviet military, and his plane crashed somewhere in about Ukraine, and then he was wounded and healed and cured by some local shamans. So the story is quite interesting, and I always draw comparison between. So he was in his isolation. This project of him, I Serve Art, is a project that Mladen Miljanović was doing over days and days, isolating him in a military barrack of heal his personal, how to say, expectations and personal experience. I think I can say even a trauma of being a soldier and later on transforming him to an artist. And there is tens of those images where he stands on an empty space when the military barrack was left over. Trains. I would consider that that film very interesting. It's made by Amir Husak, an artist and educator living in New York and teaching at a new school in New York for social engagement. He made in 2009 10 minutes video, Read Trains. I will play. I hope we will not have errors. Let's try. I don't know why this glitch is still appearing. I'm sorry. We were testing all those flows with videos and it was working perfectly. Who knows? Maybe it's something with internet, whatever. That work, Read Trains, is interesting because the train system in the former Yugoslavia was previously very well connected, very well maintained. The whole country was interconnected and even internationally connected with neighboring countries around. Nowadays, in the week of post-industrialization, of the weakening of economy and the poor, poor impoverishment, the trains are not, they are just symbol of abandonance, a symbol of failures on many levels. And just discovering in trains in Bosnia and former Yugoslavia in a stage, in the situation that they are right now, it's experience on its own. So this is the video that I couldn't show. And one of my probably most favorite projects is Charlama Depot Gallery. The project is very interesting. It actually doesn't deal so directly, critically with the social, political, and economical situation. It's actually curatorial project made by artist Yusuf Hajifezovic, one of the older generation. So he was occupying one venue in a mall, one mall that was so prominent in a time of Olympia Games in the 80s, at the end of the 80s. And now it's kind of abandoned and left over, and the management of that mall is struggling to find new solutions and to design new frames, how to attract consumption, how to get it back, how to make it alive. And Charlama Depot Gallery, made by Yusuf Hajifezovic, is very proactive project, claiming a territory, occupying a territory. So he was forced to leave that space several times, but he was very successful, always defending that space. That space particularly reminds me a lot to Detroit and the notion of space and how the space has been articulated here in Detroit. And this is also a very special topic that could be researched and articulated on many different levels. There is one very famous moment in the history. I don't have a picture right now, but briefly, so he was forced to evict, so he was evicted from that space. I mean, unsuccessfully. I'm talking about artist Yusuf Hajifezovic from that space in Charlama. And they couldn't evict him, but they cut him water and electricity. And in that time, there was a film festival in Sarajevo, and there was a prominent director, Wim Wenders, visiting as the most prominent person at the film festival. And he was visiting Yusuf and that space. So he came here to visit that gallery, and they didn't have electricity. So they were going with those lamps, with flashlights, and gazing at a piece of art and exploring art. And that image was published. So Wim Wenders with Yusuf Hajifezovic picture with light, with flashlight, exploring an exhibition was published. And it has such a great impact. It was immediately, they provided him back with electricity, and now he's kind of regaining his cultural success in that gallery. Part of those post-industrial flows is the question of working of museums in the country. And so I will just skip a few slides forward and maybe later on get back. So this is the entrance of the National Museum of Bosnia and Herzegovina, who was shut down because of political unwillingness and situation of neglecting. So museum was closed, and according to some activists and an action that I'm showing here, an exhibition made by a photographer, Zia Gafic, he was he produced a series of photographies called Museum Guardians, photographing workers, curators, and the people who are working in museum with artifacts inside. And he, with one NGO, they organized a show, an action called I Am Museum. And that was so powerful action that led to kind of similar like Occupy movement in 2000. I mean, that particular one happened 2012, well, led to reopening of the museum, and still nowadays museum is working, struggling with certain issues in a post-industrial, very impoverished society, but being still kind of successful in its museological flows. And last fragment of my presentation, it's about global migrations. Bosnia and Herzegovina just 3 years ago became a hotspot for via so-called Balkan route. So from Middle East and Northern African countries, Bosnia and Herzegovina became a hotspot for migrants who are trying to reach Northern Europe, or let's say European community countries. And last year I was collaborating with an artist, Mladen Milanovic, that I previously showed several slides of him. He made, as I said, he was a military officer, he was a soldier, and he was actually producing a piece of art called the Didactic Wall. This is a real marble wall installed in the gallery. But he used his military knowledge from military books. There is a lot of military doctrine presented in the books as a tutorial for military students, or well, for the young soldiers, how to behave in a certain situation, like tutorial how to hide from infrared, how do you say, infrared, those, I don't know how to say in English, but you know, all those things, how to overcome barricades, how to hide, how to act in a certain situation, how to provide CPR, how to cross over the fences, how to orient yourself with the sun, with the moon, and many other instructions actually made for a soldier. He was converting those educational illustrations. He was transforming them into tutorials for migrants. And that show was shown in BiH. BiH is a town just on the border between Bosnia and Croatia, between Bosnia and European Union. And all those migrants on that route, they are just stuck in that city. And there are thousands and thousands of migrants who cannot cross the border, but daily trying to come over those borders, over the forests, mountains, and hills. And they are daily pushed back, catched by Croatian police, pushed back. And I was curating this show. I was collaborating with him on this show. We published a book with kind of handbook with tutorials with those illustrations showing migrants how to overcome those barriers, natural barriers, police and military barriers, artificial barriers, and how to succeed and in their attempt to reach their desired country like Italy, Switzerland, and Germany. This is one of those illustrations. As you see on the right side, crossing the wall with small children using blanket. So he was explaining very clearly how you can do certain things, how you can cross the wall. And the book was translated so it's published in 3 languages, in English, in Spanish, because we were thinking about the need of that book, even in a border between Mexico and United States, and Arab and Urdu language. I think that although Bosnia is small country, small society, and I think that the experience from not only from Bosnia but from all over the world is very useful knowledge for available to all of us to learn how certain societies deal with certain problems and crises. And I think that art is a very strong and powerful tool to make us aware about nationalism that is on the rise everywhere in the world, even here in the United States. And those exchange of knowledge can help us to kind of act against it toward keeping universal values alive, like democracy, understanding, and other. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irfan. And you're getting many claps. I don't know if you can see the other boxes, but I do want to thank you for this amazing presentation. And a suggestion did come up when the videos weren't playing, that if you want to send me any of those links, I can share those with anyone who's interested, okay, for the films.
Okay, I will. I don't know if those videos are available online, but I will consider to maybe send you those details that I have.
Okay, great. And if you want to unshare your screen, and then for everyone else, we would love to have any questions or comments. And basically, you can type things into the chat. There are 3 of us who can see the chat and relay those to Irfan, and I can also unmute specific people if that would be easier. I also, as we're waiting for some questions to come in, I do want to show that I have a copy of the Didactic Wall Handbook. So if anyone is interested in seeing that with clean gloved hands, I would be happy to share that with you. I was lucky enough to be at the opening this summer and see an amazing panel discussion that Irfan led with, it was really about the topic of migration through the arts, and had several people who are from Bosnia living in other places dealing with those issues, including Mladen. So any questions, go ahead and put them in there. So Carolyn Robinson asks, I was wondering how the war affected the people of Bosnia. So I'm assuming the population.
Well, there are probably several. Should I answer, Ivan? Yeah. They are probably several different layers of thinking about demographical aspects of being affected, people being affected by war. So I have previously mentioned, maybe this could be interesting to repeat. I just have an issue here with my voice. I don't know if you hear it. Never mind. This is the isolation is always, everybody is at home. So I hope you don't hear the fight here with my voice in the back.
That's totally normal now.
Okay, thank you very much. So Bosnia is, as I said, multicultural country. The 3 constitutive folks there are Bosnian Muslims, which are called Bosniaks, Serbs, and Croats. And within the conflict that emerged even out of Bosnia with Serbia and Croatia, so it was not obviously civil war, the whole country was messed up, and the regions and cities has been transformed. I know personally in my town that we have been kind of, let's say approximately 60% Muslims were like predominant, but still 30% of Serbs and less than 10% approximately of Croats. And now that constitution, that demographic picture totally changed. Now, for example, from my city, Serbs are, they flew to another Serb predominantly part of the country. And the same happened with other regions and other cities. And additionally, there are many cities and regions, of course, where people not only moved within the country, but they moved out of country, they moved to other countries. And most lately, so what I was talking right now, it's like forced migrations and refugees. But right now, lately, we are having increasing number of economic migrations, and the number of people who are leaving the country for right now because of economical issues, it's immense. And this is the huge, big challenge that the politicians and responsible people in charge are trying to deal with, but still can't figure out how to solve those issues.
Thank you. And from Leslie Weigel, she asks, do some Bosnian museums still preserve Austro-Hungarian and Western European art?
Oh, definitely. I mean, Bosnia and Herzegovina was part of Ottoman Empire. And when it was annexed by Austro-Hungarians in late of 19th century, new cultural matrix has been established and let's say implemented as a model of cultural production. Since then, many museums and many art, educational and other institutions has been established, and all of them are actually working according to, let's say, those modernist standards. When I say modernist, I mean with Austro-Hungarian, because those two things are overlapping. Timely, they are overlapping. So there is the majority of the content of Bosnian museum is focused on modernism. There is a nice part of preserving art made by Austro-Hungarian and Hungarian and Italian artists who were coming to Bosnia as soldiers or working for the post or working as an architect or whatever. So there is a huge respect and huge heritage on that too.
Great, thank you. And then from Frederick S., he asks, how do you think the art in the United States played or maybe can play a similar role during the COVID-19 crisis as it did in Bosnia during the war or post-war?
Well, this is an interesting question, definitely, but I don't, honestly, I don't have an answer yet. I think I'm still trying to figure out, I mean, there are obvious similarities in a certain levels about war in Bosnia or Sarajevo under the siege, and nowadays crisis caused by COVID-19 and isolation standards. But this is just very new, and this is just very new. I'm still struggling to discover, to think about it. I don't have even the models to think about those things. How should I think about those things? I'm trying to figure it out. I'm reading, I'm following, but honestly, there are no established models of critical thinking, I would say. I mean, we can always hear some theoreticians in interviews, but I don't think there is yet comprehensive approach to that.
Yeah. And that is something I know many of our students are doing now as artists now, trying to figure it out for themselves too. So another question from Dan Lin. Irfan, do you see a similarity between the pre-Bosnian, the Yugoslavian context of many nationalities, many religions within Detroit? Do you see the cultural tensions, the border issues, post-industrial issues? Are they similar in any way between Detroit and Bosnia?
Definitely. That was the reason actually for my interest coming to Detroit, because when I was here several times here around in Michigan in the last, 10 years, I was simply triggered by those similarities. I was discovering, I was trying to find my personal, let's say, research frame, and I needed for myself kind of comparison models which I can compare and measure and relay to each other. So I was, my personal approach to that comparison is a bright industrial past, of course, in a different scales. I mean, Detroit is something globally, 100 years ago, it was something globally very important with those machinery production. But Sarajevo and Bosnia, they had also very vibrant industrial production. But there is also a conflict narratives in both contexts. In Detroit, there is that racial narrative and traumatic experience that was predominantly relate to the riots in the late 60s, in 67, which are still, the traumas are still kind of very present, and who deals as a researcher with trauma studies, this could be a very interesting spot to research. Of course, in Yugoslavia and Bosnia, the conflict background is different. And there is also that, I mean, when I'm still thinking about that comparison between those two places, but there is also that depopulation process. Detroit was having about 2 million citizens in one moment in the 50s, and now it has about 600,000 citizens. This is more than 50% of citizens disappeared, and you can just imagine how the city looks like with those empty spots, with empty houses, with the whole neighborhoods who are left over. And this is also very present, not only in Sarajevo, not only in Bosnia, but I would say in the whole former Yugoslavia, in those regions who were hit with the war. So yes, this is, there are a lot of similarities, and I mean, nationalities and religions in Bosnia, I would transform that issue here in Detroit with race.
Okay, thank you. And Guy Jordan, who is actually one of our art historians, and I wish that you two could have met in person, but now you get to meet through here. So Guy asks, do you consider the post-industrial spaces in Detroit and Bosnia sublime? Does the emptiness of the interiors turn them into something like a landscape? Guy says that he was struck by how we only see Mladen Milanovic from the back, sort of like the figures in Frederic paintings.
Oh, there is definitely, I mean, this is particularly here in Detroit, very present. I mean, Detroit is a huge city in a very big and developed society. New York, Chicago, LA, this is just part of the same values, same society. But unfortunately, Detroit had that development of experience being post-capitalist city. Some theoreticians, they even say post-American city. And I was I was very lucky reading some books. For example, I'm trying to remind Dora Appel, a scholar here from Wayne State University, writing about beautiful, terrible ruins. And she was making, and not only she was making a connection with Romanticism and the gaze onto ruins and those heroic landscapes with always somewhere in the background ruin from medieval period. And this is the issue. This is in Detroit also an issue on a certain way. There are a lot of tourists who are coming just to gaze the ruins, and there is a ruin pornography, so-called, very present here, and there are guides here. You can get a guide and he will take you to a neighborhood and you will just make a bunch of photos about ruins and you will be astonished only by the ruins. So your main focus will be ruins, not architecture, Art Deco, Mies van der Rohe, and very prominent stuff that Detroit have, but all those ruins. So yes, this is the hotspot for those things.
Thank you. And Kate Horgan is another professor here at WKU. She's a folk studies professor who has done quite a lot of work on Bosnia and was actually on the fellowship with me in 2017. And then she also had her own research this summer in Bosnia. So she was there again this past summer. And so she writes, "Thank you for a fantastic presentation, and thanks to Yvonne for hosting." Thank you, Kate. Have you noticed any patterns of difference between the way artists still living in Bosnia represent the war compared to those in the diaspora?
This is a very complex question, and I don't have a clear answer for myself on my own. I was having a scholarship 2 years ago for researching that issue in Denmark. So I was granted by Danish Arts Foundation to work with Danish artists of Bosnian origins who are living in Denmark. And I was surprised how the situation with that issue in Denmark with Bosnian artists is so, it is almost articulated as a phenomenon. All of those artists who are now about their 30s or early 40s, they are all dealing with the questions of displacement, experience of different identities, of war trauma. And I was astonished as a researcher that in Denmark, you can frame this, that as a phenomenon, as something very unique. And there is kind of a dozen of artists. You can easily make book out of it, an exhibition out of it, just showing an arts of those Bosnian artists dealing with those questions. But when you then try to articulate or project the same view, for example, I don't know, in Germany or in United States, then you just observe differences, different approach. And I'm trying to figure out what is the trigger that made that phenomenon being a phenomenon in Denmark, and why is this not the case here in United States or whatever. Because I know a lot of artists, like so-called diaspora, Bosnian diaspora artists living in United States, who deal with those questions, but still somehow very different, and it's hard to collect them in the same, let's say, in the same character.
Okay, thank you. And Nermeen El-Ansari, it's good to see you again. She asks, how do you see the Arab Spring in relation with borders and conflict?
Oh, Arab Spring. I don't know. When I think about Arab Spring, I somehow I don't know, as an art historian, I immediately think about an art also. What is the relation between those active, social unrests and arts? And I don't know, I put immediately 9/11 in that context, because of course, I mean, 9/11 is an issue, one event, one very traumatic event that is still, I mean, it's globally, it's framed as a global event, where Arabs and Muslims were actually part of that as a terrorists. And there are many layers. There are many layers thinking about the relation of 9/11, Arab Spring, and the Arab Spring is not. I would not. Nowadays, I mean, there are many years past, and nowadays we cannot. I cannot exclude Arab Spring as a singular event, because after it we have a war in Syria. We have. Wars in many countries, in Libya. I don't know, we cannot even count how many wars has been initiated and organized and unfortunately supported and fostered by NATO, by United States of America, by all those Western countries. So this situation, talking about particularly Arab Spring, from that perspective is very, very layered and very complex, I would say.
Okay, and Dan Lin has another question. Oops, sorry. You know, I have a million alarms on. Out of the various topics you covered, borders, conflict, migration, post 9/11, post-industrial, global migrations, do you find these equivalent, or is there one you feel, in your own opinion, that has a stronger grasp on social crisis? Sometimes a plate of food needs to have different types to hit all the different taste buds of the mouth. Is this the same with portraying a crisis? That is there such a wide spectrum of crisis that it is open to all mediums, and is therefore better portrayed than just in one medium? He's curious to see your take on this. It's a long question.
Well, it's a long question. It's also very wide and very layered. There are different possible answers. When it comes up to crisis, there is one issue that I haven't actually mentioned here, or maybe because it's kind of very separated and needs a very separated approach. This is an issue of art or artivism, art being engaged as a practice of activism, as a practice of political or socially engaged fight or battle. And I think this is something, so I haven't mentioned that particularly as a separated frame, but I think this one is something very important in Bosnia, because maybe an example given by Charlama Depo, by an artist who occupied former mall venue, could be just one glimpse in or one possible answer that art in Bosnia and Herzegovina, particularly in Bosnia, but also in different societies shaped by crisis, I think that artivism, so art and activism, should play a stronger role, should be a tool of emancipation, of civic resistance, of political agendas. And when I say I don't mean only parliamentary politics, I mean civic engagement and civic politics.
Thank you. He says thank you as well. So any other questions? Thank you all for asking questions, and this has been a very layered and deep look into crisis through art. And I think I just want to thank you for all that you've given to us and all you've shared with us. And I know you, from the varied talks, that what you're doing in Detroit travels from Detroit to your home in Bosnia. And so I guess with that last question too, can you talk a little bit about CROC, the art activism that you just had, and then maybe we'll call it a wrap after that.
Oh yes, definitely. Well, I couldn't believe actually in my life that I will be able to be a founder of a cultural space for contemporary culture in my city, in BiH. And this was actually organic and spontaneous development of different scholarly and activist or curatorial approach that I was doing in last years. And also being exposed to the art and activist practice here in Detroit throughout last 10 years. I was simply very lucky to be able to work on that project in BiH. And right now, we are just at the beginning, so we got abundant space of a textile company. So the NGO, the foundation that I'm coordinating right now, we are right now a legal owner of that space, and we got several financial budgets and funds even from United States, from Open Society Foundation, and we are now refurbishing that space. We are just at the end of the first stage, and very soon, I don't know how the things will develop with the virus. I hope very soon we will be free, and I will be able to initiate official program, because many great things are just on our side are going on with that CROC project. And I'm so happy that I can follow my team in BiH here from Detroit working on that project. So this is one story that I will definitely work on, and most probably you will hear more very soon about this.
And if anyone wants to look that up, it's KRAK. And so it's a new project that just got off the ground for him. So, well, Irfan, we so wish that you could have been here in person, but this has been just wonderful to have you in our spaces and still be able to share all of this information and such a wide array of artists and artistic practices with us. So thank you, and there are many thank yous that have come in as people have had to leave, and they're still coming in. So really wonderful to see you, and thank you again.
Gratitude is on my side. I thank you very much for being focused on making that happening. I'm so happy. Thank you very much to all, to you and all of your colleagues.
Okay, Vala. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.